"It's a blessing, really," my mother-in-law said, her voice carrying across the garden party with the clarity of a church bell. I was refilling a tray of champagne flutes, my back to her, but I didn't need to see her face to know the smile she was wearing. The tight, polite one she reserved for public praise that was, in private, a kind of poison. "Having Allison," she continued to a neighbor I vaguely recognized. "It's like we have a live-in maid, so wonderfully efficient." The neighbor gave a nervous little laugh. The crystal flute in my hand felt suddenly cold, impossibly fragile. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a prickling shame that was sharp and immediate. I had spent 3 days preparing for this party. 3 days shopping, cooking, cleaning. I had hand-calligraphed the place cards and arranged the flowers myself, wanting everything to be perfect for my husband Mark's promotion celebration. I straightened my spine and turned around, forcing a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, met my gaze for a fraction of a second. There was no apology in her eyes, only a cool, dismissive assessment, as if she were looking at a piece of furniture that had been slightly misplaced. I looked over at Mark. He was standing by the grill, laughing with his father. He'd heard her. I knew he had. The conversation lulled for a moment right after she spoke, a tiny pocket of silence. He had to have heard it. But he just took a sip of his beer and turned back to his father's story, his shoulders relaxed, his posture easy. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't even flinched. In that moment, under the string of festive garden lights that I had hung myself, I had never felt more alone. The sound of the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, it all faded into a distant hum. All I could hear was that one word. Maid. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed, I stood over the sink, my hands immersed in soapy water. The scent of rosemary and lemon from the roasted chicken I'd made still clung to the air. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. "Tired?" he murmured, his voice soft with contentment. The party was a huge success. Everyone loved the food. I didn't answer. I just kept scrubbing at a stubborn wine stain on one of Eleanor's heirloom plates, the ones she insisted we use for special occasions. They were delicate, webbed with fine cracks, and handling them always made my hands tremble. "Allie," he asked, his tone shifting slightly, "you okay?" I pulled my hands from the water and turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. The silence in the house was heavy. "Your mother called me a maid tonight," I said. My voice was quiet, flat. It didn't carry any of the roaring humiliation I felt inside. Mark let out a slow breath and dropped his arms. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was annoyed. "Oh, come on," he sighed. "Don't do this, not tonight." "Don't do what?" I asked, my voice rising a little despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "Don't tell you what she said, in front of all our friends. She didn't mean it like that, you know how she is." It was a compliment in her own weird way. She was saying you're efficient. A compliment? The word hung in the air between us, ugly and absurd. I stared at him, at this man I had loved for 7 years, and felt a chasm opening at my feet. "She thinks I'm the help, Mark, and you just stood there. You heard her and you did nothing." "What was I supposed to do?" he said, his voice now sharp with frustration. "Make a scene at my own party. Berate my own mother in front of everyone. You're being overly sensitive." Overly sensitive. The classic defense. The 2 words designed to make a woman question her own feelings, to make her pain feel like a flaw. I turned back to the sink and picked up the plate again. My reflection was distorted in the slick, wet ceramic. A tired woman with soap suds on her arms. "I'm going to bed," I said, not looking at him. "You can finish the dishes." He scoffed. "Fine, I'll do it." The sound of his footsteps retreating from the kitchen was louder than the argument itself. I stayed there for a long time, scrubbing a plate that was already clean, the motion mechanical. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that Eleanor was from a different generation, that Mark was just trying to keep the peace. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. It was a betrayal, quiet and complete. And it wasn't just Eleanor's words. It was my husband's silence. That night, sleeping beside him, I felt like a stranger in my own bed. The space between us was no longer just a few inches of mattress. It was a vast, cold emptiness. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek as he left for work, his briefcase in hand. "Have a great day, babe," he said, his smile bright and untroubled. I watched him go from the kitchen window, a mug of coffee growing cold in my hands. The cheerful normalcy of it felt like a form of madness. Was I the only one who remembered? I spent the day in a fog, going through the motions of my life. I worked from home, answering emails and sitting in on video calls, but my mind was elsewhere. It was replaying that moment in the garden over and over. Elinor's voice. Mark's back turned to me. I started to see things differently. It was like a filter had been removed from my eyes. I remembered all the other times, the little comments, the subtle digs. Elinor helping me reorganize my own pantry because she couldn't find the paprika. Her version of helping always involved her pointing while I did the lifting. Mark asking me to iron his shirts for a big meeting, even though we both worked full-time jobs. "You're just so much better at it," he'd say with a charming smile that made it impossible to refuse. The family vacations where I was unofficially in charge of all meals and cleanup, while Elinor and Mark's sister relaxed with magazines by the pool. I had always told myself it was because I enjoyed cooking, because I was a good host. But now I saw a pattern, a quiet, unspoken agreement. My role had been assigned to me without my consent. I wasn't a partner. I was a support system, a function. A week after the party, Mark came home buzzing with excitement. He dropped a thick, glossy folder onto the kitchen island where I was chopping vegetables for dinner. "Guess what this is," he said, his eyes shining. I opened it. It was filled with real estate listings. Grand, beautiful houses with sprawling lawns and multiple bedrooms. The kind of houses I thought only existed in movies. "The dream house," he breathed, leaning over my shoulder. "Mom found a realtor who specializes in properties like this. We're going to start looking, for real this time." For years, Mark and Elinor had shared this fantasy. A grand family home where we would all live together, where they could host lavish holidays and our future children could run free in the garden. I had always listened with a sort of detached amusement, thinking of it as a pipe dream, something they liked to talk about but would never actually happen. Now, looking at the photos of immaculate kitchens and master suites, a cold dread settled in my stomach. "Mark, these are incredibly expensive," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know," he said, his enthusiasm unchecked. "But with my promotion, and with your savings, Allie, we can actually do this. We can afford the down payment." My savings, the money my grandmother had left me. An inheritance I had guarded fiercely, a nest egg for a future I had always imagined would be my own. "Mom is so excited," he went on, oblivious to the sick feeling coiling inside me. "She's already planning the decor for her wing of the house." Her wing, I looked at him, really looked at him, at his handsome, smiling face. And I felt nothing. The warmth I used to feel, the deep and abiding love, was gone. In its place was a hollow ache. He didn't see me. He saw my savings account. He saw my good credit score. He saw the person who would make his and his mother's dream a reality. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the island. The crisp sound of the pages sliding against the granite was the only noise in the room. "I need to think about this," I said quietly. His smile faltered. "Think about what? This is what we've been talking about for years." "You've been talking about it," I corrected him gently. "You and your mother." He stared at me, his expression turning from confusion to irritation. "What is your problem lately? Ever since the party, you've been like this. Moody, distant." I didn't have the energy to argue. I didn't have the words to explain the fundamental shift that had occurred inside of me. How could I explain that his dream now felt like my cage? "I'm just tired," I said, turning back to my chopping board. The rhythmic thud of the knife was a small, steady comfort. He stood there for another moment, watching me. I could feel his gaze on my back. "Fine," he said finally, his voice clipped. "But don't take too long. These properties are going fast." He walked out of the kitchen, taking the folder with him. I was left alone with the half-chopped vegetables and the deafening silence of my own thoughts. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting one stupid comment poison my marriage. But it wasn't just the comment. It was everything that came after. It was the slow, dawning realization that the person I had built my life with didn't truly see me at all. 2 weeks passed in a strained truce. We were polite, careful. We talked about work, about the weather, about movies we'd watched. We didn't talk about the party. We didn't talk about his mother. And we didn't talk about the house. I thought, foolishly, that maybe he had let it go. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I was sorting through mail when I saw it. An envelope from a mortgage broker, addressed to both of us. My hands started to shake as I opened it. Inside was a pre-approval letter for a loan amount that made me feel dizzy, and pinned to it was a handwritten note from a leaner. Mark showed me this one online. Isn't it perfect? Let's go see it on Sunday. You'll need to bring your financial statements, Allison dear. The realtor said your credit is the key. The key. I sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the letter fluttering from my fingers. It lay on the floor, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood. He had gone behind my back. He had taken my financial information, my social security number, everything they needed, and applied for a loan without even asking me. He and his mother were moving forward with their plan, and I was simply a tool to be used. I heard the front door open. Mark walked in, whistling, a bag of groceries in his hand. He saw me on the stairs and the letter on the floor. His whistling stopped. "Oh," he said, "you got that." He didn't look guilty, he looked expectant. He set the groceries down and came toward me, a hopeful smile playing on his lips. "So, what do you think? The bank approved us for more than we even hoped. This is it, Allie. We can get the house." I looked up at him from the stairs. My heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. All the hurt, the confusion, the simmering anger of the past few weeks coalesced into a single, chilling point of clarity. He saw my name on the bank accounts, my signature on the dotted line. He saw my perfect credit score. He just didn't see me. He didn't see his wife. That's when I realized I wasn't a partner in their plan. I was just the key to the front door. I didn't move. I just sat there on the cold wooden step, the pre-approval letter a flimsy, damning piece of evidence on the floor between us. Mark's hopeful smile tightened at my silence. "Allie, did you hear me? This is huge." I raised my eyes to meet his. The hollow ache in my chest had been replaced by a strange, chilling calm. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet, hard landscape where nothing grew. "You went behind my back," I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same flat tone I might use to say, "The sky is blue." He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I didn't go behind your back, I just streamlined the process. I knew you'd be on board eventually. I was trying to make it easier for you." "Easier for me." The words were so absurd, so perfectly condescending, that I almost laughed. He wasn't making it easier for me, he was removing my choices. "You used my financial information without my consent, Mark. It's our financial information," he insisted, his voice rising in frustration. "We're married. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. Isn't that how it works?" I thought about my grandmother. I remembered her pressing the inheritance documents into my hand, her knuckles frail and dotted with age spots. "This is for you, Allison," she had whispered, her voice papery thin. "For your independence. A woman always needs a door that only she holds the key to." I had smiled and thanked her, thinking it was a sweet, old-fashioned sentiment. I hadn't understood its profound importance until this very moment. I looked at Mark, at his handsome face clouded with impatience. He truly believed what he was saying. In his world, I was an extension of him. My assets were his assets. My dreams were secondary to his. And in that moment of absolute clarity, the plan began to form. Not a loud, angry plan. A quiet one. One that would be built from the very materials he and his mother had provided. My efficiency, my attention to detail, and the assumption that I was there to serve their vision. I took a slow breath. I bent down and picked up the letter, folding it neatly. "You're right," I said softly. "It's a big step." Relief washed over his face so completely it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "Exactly. So Sunday, we'll go see the house. Mom is dying to walk through it." "Okay," I said, my voice even. "Sunday." He grinned, triumphant. He leaned down to kiss me, but I turned my head just enough that it landed on my cheek. He didn't seem to notice. He was already pulling out his phone, probably to text Alina the good news. "This is going to be amazing, Allie," he said, heading for the kitchen with the groceries. "The start of the rest of our lives." I watched him go, and for the first time I thought, yes, it is. That night, I lay in bed, feigning sleep. I listened to the sound of Mark's deep, even breathing beside me. For years, that sound had been my comfort, my anchor. Now it sounded like the rhythmic ticking of a clock, counting down the moments to my own liberation. When I was sure he was sound asleep, I slipped out of bed. The floorboards were cool beneath my bare feet. I didn't turn on any lights, navigating the familiar landscape of our home by moonlight alone. I went to my small home office, the one Mark had once called my hobby room. I sat in my chair and switched on the computer. The sudden glow of the monitor felt like an interrogation lamp in the darkness. On the corner of my desk was a silver-framed photo of my grandmother. I picked it up, tracing the outline of her kind, smiling face with my thumb. "You were right," I whispered into the silent room. "I need my own key." And then I made a promise to myself. A silent vow that was more binding than any I had made in a church 7 years ago. I promised that I would never again allow my worth to be determined by my usefulness to someone else. I promised that I would honor the gift she had given me and the independence she wanted for me. I put the photo down and turned back to the screen. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't search for decor ideas or moving companies. I searched for legal terms, tenants in common, protecting personal inheritance in a marriage, sole ownership versus joint tenancy, how to structure a property title to reflect unequal contributions. I read for hours, my eyes burning from the screen's glare. I dove into articles, legal forums, and state property laws. I took notes in a password-protected document, my thoughts clear and sharp. The humiliation from the garden party had burned away, leaving behind the hard, clean edge of purpose. I wasn't just a maid, I wasn't just a key. I was intelligent, I was capable, and I had been profoundly underestimated. That's what they never realized. The people who mock you for being quiet, who mistake your kindness for weakness, they never see the strength you're building in the silence. They don't see the careful observations you're making or the resolve hardening in your heart. By the time the first hint of dawn colored the sky, I had a new understanding of the battlefield. And I had the beginnings of a strategy. I shut down the computer and crept back to bed. When Mark's alarm went off a few hours later, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a quiet whirlwind of clauses and contingencies. Sunday arrived, bright and clear. The kind of perfect autumn day that felt full of promise. Elinor was waiting for us at the property, standing beside the realtor on the sweeping front porch. She was wearing a tailored cream-colored coat, looking every bit the lady of the manor she already believed herself to be. "There you are," she called out, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she looked at me. We were just admiring the facade. It has such wonderful bones. The house was undeniably beautiful. A grand, 2-story colonial with black shutters and a wide, welcoming doorway. It was the kind of house that graced the covers of magazines. It was also a cage, gilded and spacious, but a cage nonetheless. Mark was practically vibrating with excitement. He squeezed my hand. "See, isn't it perfect?" "It's lovely," I said, my voice carefully neutral. We went inside. Elinor led the tour, despite the realtor being present. She swept through the rooms, pointing and declaring her intentions as if the deed was already in her name. "This will be the formal living room, of course, for entertaining. The dining room is a bit small, but we can knock down this wall to extend it. And this room, just off the kitchen, it's perfect for you, Allison. You can have your little desk in here. It'll be so convenient for you to manage the household accounts and keep an eye on things while you cook." The realtor, a polished woman named Sarah, gave me a quick, questioning look. I just smiled politely. I let them drift ahead, lost in their shared fantasy. I fell back to walk with Sarah. "It's a gorgeous home," I said quietly, "but it's older. What can you tell me about the less glamorous things? The plumbing, the electrical, the foundation." Sarah's professional mask softened into a look of genuine appreciation. "Excellent questions. Most people only see the new paint. The wiring was updated 5 years ago, but the plumbing is original copper. I'd recommend a full inspection. The foundation is solid, but there's a bit of dampness in the north corner of the basement we'd need to address." For the next hour, while Mark and Elinor debated the placement of ancestral portraits, I walked with Sarah, asking practical, pointed questions. I wasn't buying a dream, I was assessing an investment, a liability. When we gathered back in the grand foyer, Elinor was beaming. "Well, I think it's decided. This is the one." Mark looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Allie, I think," I said slowly, choosing my words with care, "that we should make an offer." The joy on his and Aliner's faces was blinding. In their excitement, they didn't notice the slight hesitation in my voice. They didn't notice that I had said we should make an offer, not that I wanted the house. They only heard what they wanted to hear. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork. Mark, in his eagerness, handed it all to me. "You're so much better at this stuff, babe," he said, dropping a thick folder of bank statements, pay stubs, and loan applications on the kitchen table. "The details give me a headache. Just tell me where to sign." It was the most foolish mistake he could have made. I handled every phone call, every email. I coordinated with the mortgage broker, the inspector, the insurance agent. And most importantly, I found a lawyer. Not the family lawyer Mark's father had used for years, but a sharp, no-nonsense woman from a firm downtown whose website specialized in real estate and asset protection. I met with her on a Tuesday afternoon, telling Mark I had a dentist appointment. Her office was sparse and modern, with a large window overlooking the city. Her name was Miss Davies, and she listened to my story without a single flicker of judgment in her cool, intelligent eyes. I told her everything: the Maid comment, the savings account, my grandmother's words, the pre-approval letter. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen on a legal pad. "Your husband and his mother are operating under a set of very traditional and legally precarious assumptions," she said. "Your inheritance, provided it has been kept in a separate account and not commingled with marital assets, is your sole and separate property. You are under no obligation to use it for a joint purchase." "I know," I said, "but I don't want to just refuse. I want to correct the assumption." A slow smile spread across Miss Davies' face. "I see," she said. "You don't want to abandon the game. You want to change the rules." "Exactly." She leaned forward, all business. "Then here is what we do. We will let them proceed with the offer, using your excellent credit and financial standing to secure the loan. But when it comes time to sign the closing documents, we will have the title drawn up not as joint tenants with right of survivorship, but as tenants in common. Furthermore, we will attach a deed of trust, a separate legal instrument that specifies ownership percentages based on financial contribution." She explained it all. My inheritance would form the bulk of the down payment. Therefore, I would hold the majority ownership stake in the property. A significant majority. My name wouldn't just be a key to get the loan. It would be the name on the deed, holding the power. Mark would be a minority owner, his share proportional to his much smaller contribution. Aliner, of course, would have no legal standing at all. "He'll never agree to it if he understands it," I said. "He won't have to," Miss Davies replied calmly. "It will all be in the final packet of papers at the closing, dozens and dozens of pages. People get overwhelmed. They just sign where the lawyer tells them to sign, especially when they're excited and distracted. We will ensure the crucial documents are legally sound, but aesthetically unremarkable." She handed me her card. "You are doing the right thing, Allison. You're protecting yourself. Your grandmother would be proud." I walked out of that office feeling taller. The air of the city seemed crisper, the sounds sharper. The fear that had lived in my chest for weeks had been replaced by a cold, steady resolve. The plan was no longer just a vague idea. It had structure. It had legal teeth. A few days later, Mark and I were packing a few boxes in the living room. He wanted to get a head start to show the sellers we were serious. It was all for show, but I played along. He was holding a framed photo of us from our honeymoon, his expression soft and nostalgic. "Remember this?" he asked, his voice gentle. We were so happy. For a second, a pang of sadness hit me. I did remember. I remembered the man who had held my hand on a beach and promised to be my partner, my equal. I mourned that man, whoever he had been. But he was gone, or maybe he had never existed at all. "I'm happy right now," he continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "This house, it's everything I've ever wanted for us, for our family." Then he looked at me, his smile returning. "I've already told Mom she can start moving her things in the week we close. She's so excited. Could you call a few moving companies and get some quotes for her? Just for her stuff, from her house to the new one." He said it so casually. The assumption of my labor, my time, my energy. I wasn't his partner in building a future. I was the project manager, the unpaid assistant, the maid. Any flicker of doubt I had was extinguished. The sadness hardened back into resolve. I picked up a roll of packing tape, the sharp rip as I pulled a strip free sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Of course," I smiled. "I'll handle it." He beamed at me, completely satisfied. He had no idea what I was handling. He had no idea that I was packing up our old life and making sure he couldn't follow me into the new one. That's when I realized the key my grandmother had talked about wasn't for a door to a house. It was the key to my own life, and I was about to slide it into the lock. The day of the closing felt like a scene from a movie I was watching from a great distance. The sky was a sharp, brilliant blue. Mark was practically bouncing in the passenger seat of the car, drumming a restless rhythm on the dashboard. He had been like this for days, a bundle of nervous, joyful energy. "Can you believe it?" he asked for the 10th time that morning. "By this afternoon, we'll have the keys, the actual keys." I smiled, a small, controlled movement of my lips. "I can believe it." He took my hand, his palm warm and slightly damp. "I couldn't have done this without you, Allie. You've been incredible, handling all this paperwork." He waved a hand dismissively, as if the last month of my life had been a minor administrative task. "You're my rock." I looked at our joined hands. His words, which once would have filled me with warmth, now felt hollow. I wasn't his rock. I was his leverage. And he was about to find out just how much weight I could actually move. Eleanor was meeting us at the lawyer's office. She wanted to be there for the historic moment. When we walked into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, she was already seated at the head of the long, polished table, holding court with the title agent. Miss Davies, my lawyer, stood as I entered. She gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Her presence was a silent anchor in the room, a point of calm in the swirling sea of Mark's and Eleanor's excitement. I had insisted she be there, telling Mark it was standard practice for a purchase of this size. He had shrugged, too caught up in the fantasy to question the details. "Allison, darling," Eleanor trilled, standing to give me an air kiss that smelled faintly of expensive hairspray. "Isn't this thrilling? I've already ordered the most magnificent chandelier for the foyer. It's a family heirloom, you know." I murmured something noncommittal and took my seat beside Mark. Opposite us was a stack of papers that was easily 5 inches thick. It looked less like a home purchase and more like a corporate merger. Mark's eyes widened. "Wow, that's a lot of trees." The title agent, a pleasant man named Mr. Henderson, smiled. "Standard closing packet. We'll walk you through the important parts." Miss Davies cleared her throat softly. "My clients have reviewed the preliminary documents," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "We can proceed to the signatures to save time." Mark shot me a grateful look. "See, I told you she was efficient." The next hour was a carefully choreographed performance. Mr. Henderson would slide a document across the table, give a 1-sentence summary, and point. "Sign here for the title insurance, initial here for the property tax agreement, signature here for the loan disclosure." My hand moved smoothly, my signature a familiar, steady script. I knew exactly what I was signing. I had read every single line of every single page in the days leading up to this moment. Mark, however, was just a puppet following directions. He didn't read a word. He was too busy making eye contact with his mother, sharing triumphant little smiles. He was signing away his future, and all he could think about was the chandelier in the foyer. Then came the moment I had been preparing for. Mr. Henderson slid 2 documents forward, the deed and the ancillary deed of trust. "And this is the grant deed, transferring the property," he said, pushing it toward Mark first. "And the corresponding deed of trust, as specified by counsel." My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. This was it. Mark picked up the pen. He looked at the top of the page, at the dense block of legal text. His eyes glazed over. He looked at me. "This is the big one, huh?" he said with a boyish grin. I met his gaze. I felt a fleeting, ghost-like sadness for the man I thought I had married. But he was gone, and I had to save myself. "Yes," I said, my voice perfectly even. "This is the one that matters." He scribbled his name with a flourish and pushed the papers toward me. I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt significant in my hand. I could feel Eleanor's eyes on me, sharp and impatient. I could feel Mark's excitement, a tangible pressure in the air. I signed my name. Allison C. Ward, not just a wife, not just a maid, a legal entity, an owner. The rest of the signing was a blur of minor forms. When it was all over, Mr. Henderson gathered the papers into a neat stack. He smiled warmly. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Ward. You are now homeowners. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, white envelope. He slid it across the table to me. Inside were 2 freshly cut brass keys. Mark let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed the envelope, pulled out one of the keys, and held it up like a trophy. We did it. Eleanor clapped her hands together, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. Finally, now the real work begins. Allison, I'll email you the color palettes I've chosen for the downstairs. We need to get the painters scheduled for next week. Miss Davies stood and gathered her briefcase. She shook my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. My work here is done, she said, looking me directly in the eye. Call me if you require any further clarification. Thank you, I said, and the words were filled with a gratitude so immense it was hard to contain. The ride to the house was surreal. Mark drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding the key. He couldn't stop looking at it. Our own front door, he kept saying, shaking his head in wonder. Eleanor sat in the back, issuing a steady stream of directives. The first thing we must do is measure for the drapes. And Allison, you'll need to contact the utility companies first thing tomorrow. The accounts should be in your name. It's just cleaner that way. I said nothing. I just watched the scenery go by, the familiar streets giving way to the tree-lined avenues of the new neighborhood. I felt strangely detached, as if I were floating above my own body. The storm was over. The tsunami was about to hit the shore. We pulled into the long, curving driveway. The house stood before us, silent and stately. It was just a building of wood and brick, but to them, it was a kingdom. Mark practically jumped out of the car. He ran to the front door, Eleanor close behind him. I followed at a slower pace, my new key feeling cool and solid in my pocket. Let me do the honors, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, solid click. He pushed the door open. It swung inward, revealing the grand, empty foyer. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The house smelled of fresh paint and old wood. Home, Eleanor breathed, stepping across the threshold as if she were a queen entering her castle. Mark pulled me into his arms, kissing me soundly. We're home, Allie. He let me go, and they both began to wander through the empty rooms, their voices echoing in the vast space. Their conversation was a torrent of plans, of assumptions, of ownership. My suite will be this one, of course. It gets the morning light. Mark, we'll put the grand piano right here. Allie can set up her little office in that nook by the stairs. It won't be in the way there. I stood in the center of the foyer, listening. I let them have their moment. I let them build their entire fantasy life in the space of 10 minutes. Finally, they came back to the foyer, their faces flushed with excitement. Well, Eleanor said, clapping her hands together with an air of finality. There's so much to do. I've made a list of the initial deep cleaning tasks. Allison, you can get started on the kitchens and bathrooms this weekend. I want everything sanitized before my furniture arrives. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a list, written in her elegant, looping script. Scrub all cabinets inside and out. Polish all fixtures. Bleach grout in master bath. I looked down at the list, then I looked up at her smiling, expectant face. This was the moment. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it landed in the echoing foyer like a stone. Eleanor's smile faltered. I'm sorry. I said no, I repeated, my voice a little stronger this time. I won't be doing that. Mark laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound. Allie, don't be like that. Mom's just trying to be organized. We all have to pitch in. I agree, I said, turning my gaze to him. We do, which is why I've already taken the liberty of scheduling a professional deep cleaning service for tomorrow morning. As the majority owner of this property, I felt it was a necessary expense. Silence, a deep, profound silence that swallowed the sunlight. Mark's face was a canvas of confusion. Majority owner? What are you talking about? We're joint owners. We bought it together. Not exactly, I said calmly. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder Miss Davies had given me. It contained my copies of the signed documents. I took out the deed of trust. We own the house as tenants in common. It's a legal structure that assigns ownership percentages based on financial contribution. I held the paper out. As my inheritance, which is legally my sole and separate property, was used for 85% of the down payment and closing costs, I am the 85% owner of this house. Your contribution accounts for 15%. Legally, Mark, this is my house. Mark stared at the paper, but his eyes weren't focusing. He looked at me, his expression crumbling from confusion into dawning horror. What? No. That's not possible. We signed. You signed exactly what was put in front of you, I said, my voice devoid of anger. It was just factual. You were so excited about the keys, you didn't bother to read the contract. Eleanor snatched the paper from my hand. Her eyes, sharp and practiced at scanning designer labels, flew across the legal text. I could see the moment she understood. A dark flush crept up her neck, staining her perfectly powdered skin. You tricked us, she hissed, the word a venomous dart. This is fraud. Not at all, I said, retrieving the document from her trembling fingers. It's just business. A legal and binding agreement that protects my investment. You of all people should understand that, Eleanor. You're always so concerned with protecting family assets. Mark finally found his voice. It was hoarse with disbelief. My own wife, you did this behind my back. Did you not go behind my back when you applied for a loan using my financial information without my consent? I asked him gently. I simply saw the process through to its logical conclusion. You wanted me to handle the paperwork, so I did, very efficiently. The word hung in the air, efficiently. He flinched as if I had slapped him. I don't understand, he stammered, looking from me to his mother and back again like a lost child. This was supposed to be our family home, our asterisk dream. It was always your asterisk dream, Mark, I said, and for the first time, a tremor of the pain they had caused me entered my voice. It was your dream and your mother's. I was just the tool you were going to use to build it. I was the good credit score. I was the savings account. I was the maid who was supposed to clean it. I took her ridiculous list and tore it in half, letting the pieces flutter to the polished floor. My duties in this house, I said, looking directly at Eleanor, will be whatever I decide they are. And your role as a guest will be to respect that, or you can find somewhere else to live. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The look on her face was a masterpiece of shattered arrogance. The lady of the manor had just been told she was a tenant, subject to eviction. Mark finally exploded. You can't do this, Allison. This is my house too. We're married. A marriage is a partnership, Mark, an equal partnership. For years, I've been treated as an employee, an unpaid, unappreciated employee. The party was just the moment I finally realized I needed to quit. I took a deep breath, the clean, empty air of the house filling my lungs. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday. My lawyer will be in touch with yours to discuss the dissolution of our assets, including your 15% share of this property. I'm prepared to buy you out. He just stared at me, his face pale with shock. The dream wasn't just dying, it had been an illusion all along. He had never been close to grasping it. I walked to the front door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I paused with my hand on the cool brass knob. You called me a maid, Eleanor, I said, without turning around. And you, Mark, you let her. You both made it very clear what my place was in your world. I turned to look at them one last time, standing there amidst the ruins of their grand ambition. Two stunned, pathetic figures in a house that would never be theirs. Well, you were right about one thing, I said, a faint, sad smile touching my lips. The maid did get the house, she just owns it now. I stepped out into the bright afternoon sunshine and pulled the door closed behind me. The click of the lock sealing was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. That's when I realized my grandmother's key hadn't just unlocked a door. It had locked one behind me forever. I didn't go back. I never spent a single night in that house. It had served its purpose. The divorce was messy, but not in the way Mark had hoped. The paperwork was ironclad. Miss Davies handled everything with surgical precision. Mark's blustering and Eleanor's threats crumbled against the solid wall of contract law. In the end, he had no choice but to accept the buyout for his 15%. It was a substantial amount of money, but it was a pittance compared to the grand prize they had lost. I put the house on the market a week after the divorce was finalized. It sold in 3 days for well over the asking price. The profits, combined with the rest of my inheritance, became the foundation for my new life. I left the city. I moved to a small town by the coast, a place where the air tasted of salt and the rhythm of life was dictated by the tides. I bought a small, modest cottage with a garden that backed onto a quiet stretch of beach. It was nothing like the grand colonial mansion. It had no foyer for a chandelier, no formal dining room. It had crooked floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew, and it was the most beautiful home I had ever seen. I spent my days painting, a passion I had set aside for years because Mark considered it a messy hobby. I adopted a dog from the local shelter. I learned the names of my neighbors. I took long walks on the beach, watching the waves wash the sand clean again and again. Sometimes I thought of Mark and Alina. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a distant kind of pity. They had been so consumed with the appearance of wealth, with the performance of status, that they had lost sight of everything that truly mattered. They had a dream of a house, but they never knew how to build a home. One afternoon, about a year after I had moved, I was sorting through an old box of photos and found the one of Mark and me on our honeymoon. The one he had held with such nostalgia. We looked so young, so full of a hope that now seemed impossibly naive. For a moment, I mourned the love I thought we'd had. But I didn't mourn the woman I used to be. The one who scrubbed heirloom plates while her husband ignored her humiliation. The one who accepted disrespect with a quiet smile. She was gone, and in her place was a woman who knew her own worth. A woman who understood that respect isn't something you earn through service. It's something you command by refusing to be devalued. I put the photo back in the box and closed the lid. My peace was my own. It wasn't a grand victory, just a quiet, steady truth. The house, the money, the legal battle, they weren't the revenge. The revenge was my freedom. It was the silence of my own home, broken only by the sound of the ocean. It was the simple, profound joy of being the sole owner of my own life. I stopped waiting for their apology. Peace was mine to give. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe. More true-to-life tales of courage, family, and quiet revenge await here. Thank you for listening.